My husband didn't just leave me. He left me for the one person who had been taking pieces of my life since we were children. And when they stood together in front of everyone and smiled like they had won, neither of them realized something terrifying. I had spent 20 years learning how to survive betrayal. And this time I wasn't going to beg anyone to love me. My name is Emily Harper. I'm 42 years old, and for the last 17 years, I've worked as a neonatal intensive care nurse in Seattle. People often tell me I have a calming presence. They say I always know how to comfort frightened parents, how to smile through exhaustion, how to remain steady in the middle of chaos. They don't know I learned that skill because my entire childhood was chaos. When you grow up constantly being overlooked, you become very good at making yourself invisible. My younger sister, Sophie, was 39, beautiful, effortlessly charming, and according to my mother, practically perfect. Growing up, people called us the Harper girls, but even as children, everyone knew there was really only one Harper girl that mattered, Sophie. I was simply the older sister who was expected to understand, always sacrifice, always forgive. I can't remember a single birthday growing up that wasn't somehow turned into a celebration for Sophie. When I was 10, my parents forgot to bring my birthday cake because Sophie had gotten sick at a friend's house. Mom spent the entire evening comforting her. Dad left halfway through my party to pick up Sophie from ballet practice because she didn't feel comfortable waiting. I remember sitting at the dining room table staring at the empty spot where the cake should have been. Grandma Evelyn had squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," I smiled. "It's okay," but it wasn't okay, and deep down I knew it. By 13, I had learned that being disappointed quietly earned more approval than expressing hurt. Whenever I cried, Mom would sigh dramatically. "Emily, stop being so sensitive." Whenever Sophie broke something and blamed me, Dad would shrug, "You're older. You should know better." Whenever Sophie wanted something I owned, my parents would say, "She's your sister, share." My bedroom, my clothes, my books, even my friends, especially my friends. At 15, I finally made the varsity swim team. I had trained for 2 years, every morning before school, every weekend. I was proud, really proud, until Sophie decided she wanted to swim too. She joined 3 weeks later. Suddenly, Mom attended every practice. Dad bought her expensive gear. People cheered for her. Meanwhile, I was breaking records. Nobody noticed. At the end of season banquet, Sophie won Most Improved. Dad stood up clapping, Mom cried, and when I received MVP, they were outside because Sophie had gotten a stomachache. I drove home with Coach Reynolds. He handed me my plaque. "Kid, one day you'll understand that some people don't deserve front row seats in your life." I didn't understand then. But I never forgot those words. Years later, I met Daniel. I was 22, fresh out of nursing school, working double shifts, exhausted constantly. Daniel was funny, gentle, kind. He worked in accounting and volunteered at animal shelters. He listened when I talked, actually listened. On our third date, he brought me flowers, not expensive flowers, wildflowers. Because I'd mentioned once that my grandmother grew daisies. Nobody had ever remembered little things like that before, nobody except Grandma Evelyn, and suddenly I felt seen, really seen. For the first time in my life, we married 3 years later. Grandma Evelyn cried through the entire ceremony. Mom spent most of the reception complaining about Sophie not having a date, and Sophie. Well, Sophie flirted with half the groomsmen. I should have recognized the look she gave Daniel, but back then I still believed certain lines existed, certain boundaries, certain loyalties. I was wrong. Over the years, Daniel and I built a beautiful life, not glamorous but peaceful. We bought a modest house, raised 2 children, Emma and Noah, shared inside jokes, movie nights. Sunday pancakes, little traditions. I thought we were happy, not perfect, but happy. Then Grandma Evelyn died and something inside me shifted. She had been 87. The only person who had ever truly chosen me. At her funeral, everyone talked about her kindness, her warmth, her wisdom, but what nobody knew was that Grandma had spent years quietly preparing me. Not financially, emotionally. She had always seen things others didn't. One night when I was 21, we sat on her porch watching rain hit the roses. She looked at me and said, "Emily, one day you'll understand that some people love what you provide, not who you are." I laughed. "That's depressing." "No, sweetheart. It's freeing," she smiled softly. "When you stop chasing love from people who enjoy withholding it, you'll finally find peace." At the time, I thought she was talking about Mom. Now I wonder if she somehow saw everything. After her death, Mom became even more dependent on Sophie, and Sophie became even more dependent on drama. 3 divorces by age 37. Endless financial disasters, constant emergencies. She called crying every week. Mom rushed to save her. Dad refinanced his retirement account twice, and every time I expressed concern, Mom snapped. Family helps family. Funny, that sentence only worked one direction. One Christmas, Sophie forgot gifts entirely. I bought presents for her children because I couldn't stand seeing them disappointed. Mom praised Sophie for doing her best. Nobody mentioned that I'd spent 3 months planning dinner. Nobody thanked me, not really. I was simply expected to keep giving, and I did because that's what good daughters did, good sisters, good wives, good mothers, until I turned 40. Something strange happened. I got tired, not physically, emotionally, the kind of exhaustion sleep can't fix, the kind that settles in your bones. Daniel noticed, "You're quieter lately." I smiled. Just work, but it wasn't work. I had started noticing things, tiny things, the way Daniel checked his phone more. How Sophie suddenly started showing up at family dinners with perfect hair and expensive perfume. How they laughed a little too easily together. How conversations stopped when I entered rooms. Little things, harmless things, probably nothing, at least that's what I told myself. One evening, Sophie came over unexpectedly. She wore a tight black dress and red lipstick. Daniel was grilling outside. She hugged me, then immediately walked to the backyard. I followed and found them laughing, not strange, not inappropriate, just comfortable, too comfortable. Daniel looked startled when he saw me. Sophie smiled brightly. "We were just talking about old movies." Without me, she laughed. "Oh, don't be dramatic." That word, dramatic, Mom's favorite word. Sophie's favorite weapon, the word used whenever I noticed something uncomfortable. I ignored it because that's what I always did. Months passed, then Emma came home from college one weekend. She sat beside me in the kitchen. "Mom," she hesitated. "You okay?" I smiled. "Why, you seem sad." "I'm fine." "No, you're not." She lowered her voice. "And Dad's weird around Aunt Sophie." I froze. "What do you mean?" Emma shrugged. "I don't know, maybe nothing." But her expression told me everything. She'd noticed too. Children always notice. Noah had noticed something as well. He was 16, quiet, observant like me. One evening he asked, "Mom, why does Aunt Sophie call Dad all the time?" My heart skipped. "What? Nothing," he shrugged. "She called while you were working. Dad went outside to talk." I forced a smile. "Probably family stuff." Noah looked unconvinced. Kids know when adults lie. That night I couldn't sleep. At 2 in the morning I walked downstairs. Daniel wasn't beside me. I found him sitting on the patio, phone in hand, smiling. He jumped when he saw me. "Couldn't sleep? Who were you texting?" He locked the screen immediately. No one, not work, not Mike, not Sophie. No one." I nodded slowly, and something deep inside me whispered, "Pay attention." So I started paying attention, not accusing, not spying, just observing, and what I observed terrified me. Sophie suddenly had money, designer bags, new jewelry, weekend trips. Meanwhile, she claimed she was struggling. Daniel became distant, physically, emotionally. Conversations grew shorter, affection disappeared. He forgot anniversaries, forgot little things, forgot me. Yet somehow remembered Sophie's favorite wine. One night I overheard Mom talking on speakerphone. Sophie was laughing. "I swear, Mom, Daniel understands me better than any man I've ever dated." Mom chuckled. "Well, he's wonderful." Neither of them knew I was standing in the hallway. Neither of them heard my coffee mug shatter against the floor. Mom turned. Oh, her face changed. Sophie went silent, and Mom actually had the audacity to say, "You misunderstood." I stared at her. "Did I?" She crossed her arms. "Don't start creating problems." Creating problems, not asking questions, not being hurt, creating problems. I looked at Mom, really looked. And suddenly I wasn't 41. I was 10 years old again, waiting for a birthday cake that never came. 15 years old, holding an MVP plaque nobody celebrated. 28. Buying Christmas gifts for everyone while everyone praised Sophie. 40, standing invisible in my own marriage. Something inside me cracked, quietly, not dramatically, not loudly, just a tiny crack. But sometimes tiny cracks become earthquakes. Mom frowned. "Emily," I bent down and picked up the broken mug. "It's okay." That answer seemed to relieve her, because everyone loved that answer. "It's okay." I spent 40 years saying it, but for the first time in my life, I realized something terrifying. It wasn't okay. And somewhere deep inside me, the little girl who had spent her entire life begging to be loved, finally stopped begging. She simply started watching, very carefully. Because if there was one thing 20 years of being overlooked had taught me, it was that people become careless when they think you've accepted your place. And Daniel and Sophie had no idea. I was finally paying attention, and what I would discover over the next few months would destroy everything I thought I knew about my marriage. But it would also reveal something they never expected. I had been preparing for betrayal my entire life, and I was finished being the woman who stayed silent. After that night, I stopped arguing. That surprised everyone, especially Daniel, especially my mother, and especially Sophie, because they were used to tears, used to explanations, used to me fighting for crumbs. Instead, I became quiet. Not angry, not cold, just quiet, and quiet people see everything. Over the next 3 months, I watched my husband slowly disappear from our marriage. He started staying late. Started protecting his phone, started smiling at messages while barely speaking to me. I didn't chase him, I didn't beg, I simply paid attention. And what hurt the most wasn't the affair. It was how ordinary they acted, as if I were furniture, as if 17 years of marriage and 40 years of being Sophie's sister meant nothing. Then one afternoon, Emma called me. Mom, her voice sounded strange. I saw Dad. Okay, he wasn't at work. My heart sank. He was at a restaurant. I already knew, I don't know why. Maybe because sometimes your soul knows before your mind catches up. And, I whispered, Emma was crying. He was with Aunt Sophie. I closed my eyes, neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered, I'm sorry, Mom, and somehow, hearing my daughter apologize for something she didn't do broke my heart more than the betrayal itself. That night, I sat alone in the backyard. And for the first time in my life, I didn't ask, why am I not enough? Instead, I asked, why do I keep giving people permission to hurt me? Grandma Evelyn's voice echoed inside my head. Some people love what you provide, not who you are. And suddenly everything became clear. I made appointments, met with an attorney, separated finances, copied documents, prepared quietly. No screaming, no revenge, no drama, because I wasn't trying to win him back. I was preparing to let him go. 6 weeks later, they stopped hiding. Mom invited everyone to Sunday dinner. I should have known. Halfway through dessert, Daniel cleared his throat. Sophie smiled, and then my husband of 17 years held my sister's hand. I think Emily deserves honesty. My entire body went numb. Mom nodded approvingly. Dad stared at his plate and Sophie smiled, actually smiled. Daniel looked relieved. We fell in love. Silence. Then Sophie squeezed his hand. It just happened. Mom reached across the table. Honey, I know this is hard, but love is complicated. Love, interesting word. Because betrayal always calls itself love. I looked around the room. Nobody was looking at me. Everyone was looking at them like they were some tragic romance. Then Sophie said something I'll never forget. You've always been stronger than me, Emily. You'll be okay. I stared at her, and suddenly 40 years of pain disappeared, not because I forgave her. Because I finally understood her. She hadn't won. She had simply taken another thing that wasn't hers, just like she always had, and people only steal what they can't build themselves. I stood up. Mom panicked. Emily, no. For the first time in my life, I interrupted her. No, Mom. Everyone froze. I smiled, not angrily, peacefully. I hope you two make each other happy. Sophie's smile faded. Daniel blinked. That wasn't the reaction they expected. No tears, no begging, no scene, just peace. I grabbed my purse. And before leaving, I looked at my mother. You chose her your entire life. Then I looked at Daniel. And you chose her too. Finally, I smiled. So now you all get exactly what you wanted. And I walked away. 3 weeks later, I filed for divorce. Daniel was shocked. You're giving up that easily? Giving up after 20 years? No. I was finally letting go. Emma moved in with me. Noah refused to speak to his father. Mom called constantly. I stopped answering, not out of hatred, out of self-respect. People confuse forgiveness with access. They're not the same thing. Months passed. Then one evening, Dad showed up alone. He looked older, smaller somehow. I failed you, he whispered. And for the first time in my life, I saw tears in my father's eyes. I should have protected you. I hugged him, and we cried together, not because it fixed everything. Because some wounds deserve to be acknowledged. A year later, I heard through relatives that Daniel and Sophie fought constantly. Neither trusted the other. Funny how that works. People who betray together spend the rest of their lives wondering who's next. Mom stopped calling. Dad left her. Apparently, after 40 years, he had finally grown tired too. As for me, I planted roses in Grandma Evelyn's memory, traveled, started painting again, learned how to enjoy silence. And one afternoon, while watering flowers, Emma hugged me. You know something, Mom? What? You smiled differently now. I laughed. Do I? She nodded. Yeah, how? She smiled. Like someone who finally stopped waiting to be chosen. And I stood there in the sunlight, feeling the breeze on my face, thinking about the little girl who waited for birthday cakes. The teenager holding an award nobody celebrated. The wife who tried so hard to be enough, and I wished I could go back and tell her something. Not everyone who loses you suffers immediately. Not everyone who hurts you regrets it, but peace is its own revenge, because one day you wake up, and the people who spent years making you feel invisible no longer occupy your thoughts. And that's when you realize they didn't destroy you. They simply forced you to meet the version of yourself that no longer needed their love, and after 42 years. I finally understood what Grandma Evelyn had been trying to teach me all along. Never beg for a seat at tables where your absence isn't noticed. Build your own table. And invite only those who are happy to see you sit there.